Good evening. We begin tonight with a question about the President of the United States and obstruction of justice. Namely, can the President of the United States obstruct justice if he attempts to shut down an FBI investigation into someone he knows has committed a crime? It's a question that's front and center tonight because of what the President seemed to admit in a tweet over the weekend and what the President's attorney said about it today. Former President Richard Nixon didn't seem to believe a president could be accused of obstructing justice. Here's what he said to David Frost in the spring of 1977.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
So the fact that Richard Nixon said this as an ex-president forced out of office, named by a grand jury as an unindicted conspirator in the Watergate affair, and having been nearly impeached, maybe that should tell you how well that argument went over at the time. Yet it is being revived today over this presidential tweet from Saturday morning. Quote, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies. It is a shame because his actions during the transition were lawful. There was nothing to hide." Now, that is a stunning tweet because until that tweet was sent, as far as the public knew, the president fired National Security Advisor Michael Flynn for lying to Vice President Pence about contact with the Russians. Yet the tweet says, and let's just show it again, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI." Now, lying to the vice president is certainly ill-advised, but look, vice presidents are probably used to that sort of thing, and it's not illegal. The second, lying to the FBI, that is a felony. So this tweet suggests that when the president fired General Flynn, he knew or had reason to believe that Flynn had lied to the FBI, thereby committing a crime. That tweet suggests that when President Trump had dinner on the 27th of January with then FBI Director James Comey, and according to Comey, asked him for his loyalty, that means that the president knew or had reason to believe on that night that the National Security Advisor had committed a crime. This tweet also suggests that on February 14th, when Comey says the president asked him to drop the FBI investigation into Flynn, the president knew or had reason to believe that Flynn had lied to Comey's agents, committing a crime. And now we have new CNN reporting that says the president was, in fact, advised to that effect. How did the White House come to know that Flynn had lied? Well, remember Sally Yates, the acting attorney general at the time. On the 26th of January, Yates made an urgent appointment to brief White House counsel Don McGahn about what she knew of Flynn's contact with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak and how it contradicted what Vice President Pence had said about it publicly. She spoke about it exclusively with me, though she declined to give specifics. When were you first made aware that General Flynn was lying about his interactions with the Russian ambassador?
Well, first let me say, and I know that this may seem kind of artificial to folks, I can't really talk about what General Flynn's underlying conduct was because that's based on classified information.
Can you say when you were made aware about an issue with his underlying conduct?
It was in the early part of January where we first got some indication about what he had been involved in, and then sort of the middle part of January when there were false statements that started coming out of the White House based on misrepresentations he had made to people there.
So 2 weeks went by after Yates spoke to the White House before Flynn was forced out for lying to the vice president about his contacts with Russians. That's the reason the White House said they fired Flynn. And now our source, a source familiar with the matter, tells us that Don McGahn, after speaking with Yates, briefed the president, telling him that based on his conversation with Yates, he believed Flynn had not told the truth in his interview with the FBI. Now, we don't know the precise date, but we do know it happened and that it happened in January. Again, this means that when the president allegedly asked James Comey to go easy on Flynn, he may have known or at least had reason to believe that Flynn had committed a felony. And that means this tweet on Saturday could provide additional evidence he obstructed justice, which may explain why the White House, especially the president's personal attorney, John Dowd, has been doing such damage control regarding that individual tweet. Dowd first saying that the part in the tweet referring to lying to the FBI wasn't a new admission, but instead was merely paraphrasing what was in White House attorney Ty Cobb's statement about General Flynn's guilty plea. Then there was another explanation. Dowd said that actually he, not the president, was the one who wrote the tweet, acknowledging it was sloppily worded. Well, then today, the he didn't write it narrative seemed to have kind of been put aside. The new narrative isn't only that President Trump didn't obstruct justice, it is, to borrow from Richard Nixon 4 decades ago, that a president cannot obstruct justice. Mr. Dowd telling the news site Axios, the, quote, president cannot obstruct justice because he's the chief law enforcement officer under the Constitution's Article 2 and has every right to express his view of any case.
White House counsel Don McGahn told President Trump back in January, CNN has learned, that he believed then National Security Advisor Michael Flynn had misled the FBI during their January 24th interview with Flynn and lied to Vice President Mike Pence. A source familiar with the matter told CNN Today. This means that the president knew Flynn had potentially committed a felony when, according to then FBI Director James Comey, on February 14th, after the president had fired Flynn, he said to Comey, quote, "I hope you can see your way clear to letting this go, to letting Flynn go. He is a good guy. I hope you can let this go." Now, if the president was aware that Flynn had likely committed a federal crime when he made that alleged request, which the president disputes, that raises serious questions of potential obstruction of justice, though this morning the president's lawyer, John Dowd, claimed such a thing was, by definition, impossible. In a new interview with Axios, Dowd said, quote, "The president cannot obstruct justice because he is the chief law enforcement officer under the Constitution's Article 2 powers and has every right to express his view of any case," unquote. In other words, the president is, according to Dowd, above this law. Kindly remember that one of then candidate Trump's pitches to voters last year was that the Clintons thought of themselves as above the law, but that he would be different.
No one will be above the law. We will have one set of rules for everyone.
That argument perhaps not as compelling with an asterisk and fine print, but the news that the president knew Flynn had misled the FBI before that alleged conversation with Comey began over the weekend, after Flynn, of course, pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI. Trump tweeted, quote, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI. He has pled guilty to those lies," unquote. Now, the president's tweet prompted no fewer than 43 question marks from former director of the U.S. Government Ethics Office, Walter Schaub. He asked, "Are you admitting you knew Flynn had lied to the FBI when you asked Comey to back off Flynn?" And then multiple question marks. Now, if the president did know when he allegedly asked former FBI Director James Comey to halt his investigation of Flynn, then, according to Senator Dianne Feinstein, the ranking Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, well, then
I think what we're beginning to see is the putting together of a case of obstruction of justice.
But wait, the president's lawyer, John Dowd, now claims that he is the one who wrote that potentially incriminating tweet, which might make understandable then his announcement today that no president can commit the act of obstruction of justice. Though, to be fair, this whole defense seemed to be somewhat in the works back in June when I asked a different Trump attorney, Jay Sekulow, whether he and the rest of Trump's legal team believed the president was incapable of obstructing justice.
You're talking about what's called the constitutional threshold question, and that is, can a president who has the constitutional authority to take a certain action then be prosecuted for taking the action? If there is an investigation, right now there's not, you would, of course, raise the constitutional issues. Any lawyer, especially those that do it at the Supreme Court of the United States, like I do, you raise the constitutional issue threshold. That's number one.
The Trump legal team is now raising that constitutional issue, regardless of the fact that such an argument is a complete contradiction from what candidate Trump promised voters.
No one is above the law. Clinton and her cronies will say anything, do anything, lie about anything to keep their grip on power, to keep their control over our country.
Again, we'll remind you, broken campaign promises are not a crime. But speaking of Clinton, it is worth remembering that in December 1998, the House of Representatives impeached her husband, Bill Clinton, and one of those two articles of impeachment was obstruction of justice. And of course, in July 1974, the House Judiciary Committee voted on bringing forth 3 articles of impeachment against President Nixon, and one of them was obstruction of justice. So previous Congresses, Democrat and Republican, have disagreed with these arguments coming from all the president's men. Though see if this argument sounds familiar to you.
What you're saying is that there are certain situations, and the Houston plan, or that part of it was one of them, where the president can decide that it's in the best interest of the nation or something, and do something illegal.
Well, when the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
Discussing what's happening down in Alabama. So, Ed, we're not supposed to believe any of those people. We're supposed to believe any of them.
I've said there's a difference over and over again, Don, on your show and everywhere else on CNN, that if somebody admits to it, like Al Franken admitted to it, Conyers admitted to it, the FBI agent has now admitted to misconduct, then there ought to be a standard. But if someone denies it, whether it's Donald Trump or Roy Moore, we shouldn't. I'm not saying Roy Moore should be only believed, But 5 or 6
Yeah,
weeks
that's what you're
before an
saying.
election, Don,
That's what you're saying.
No.
The Access Hollywood tape was a couple weeks before the election. The president admitted to it and apologized for it. So then what's the difference?
Well,
it was true. It turned out to be true.
He admitted it to it. He admitted
but it
that he
turned
said
out
those
to be
things.
true. He had it was on tape. He couldn't. The reason I'm asking you, here's why this upsets me, okay? And this is no secret to, except for new people who are watching, that I was a victim of childhood sexual abuse. And it is tough. No one, Ed, no one, no matter how old you are, wants to come out and admit that publicly. It is just not something that is done, especially when you're talking about something that happens at that young an age. And that is what's so upsetting to so many people. And here you are, sitting here on CNN, twisting yourself into a pretzel to try to defend something that is indefensible. Not one person wants to come out and say that. Not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5. Certainly not 12 women.
What's the benefit to these women? They get hate mail. They're not getting any financial benefit or anything out of this either. I mean,
Don, I mean, please, Don, if you're going to say that to me on national television, at least give me a chance to say something back. I mean, I have never said that we shouldn't, when someone alleges, especially childhood abuse, and there's one of the claims that it's a 14-year-old, I have never said we shouldn't honor that and investigate it. It should be done. But what I've said is when the litany of things rolled out, a lot of them by non-minors, the question is, who do you believe? I don't disbelieve the women. I'm just saying that the people of Alabama get to vote on who they want, and we'll see what happens. And to call someone a child molester is really outrageous.
Okay, go on.
Hey, Don.
Bakari. Yeah, sorry you didn't get a chance to talk. Go ahead, Bakari.
Thank you for letting me join the conversation. You know, I think that multiple women in Alabama actually were minors. In fact, you had the instance where he was banned from the mall. You had the 14-year-old. You had the 17-year-old. You've had these instances before. But this reminds me of, I think it was 1983 with Governor Edwards down in your home state, Don, of Louisiana, who said I couldn't lose an election if I was caught with unless I was caught with a live boy or a dead girl. I mean, what we're seeing now is we're seeing as Tara said, we're seeing the decay of the Republican Party. And what's more troublesome for me is the hypocrisy. That's what gets me. I mean, you have a party, and I'm not going to debate this right now, but you have a party who cares so much about a child in the womb. However, they're willing to put someone who has these type of serious charges. I mean, Ivanka Trump said it best. There's no place for anyone who preys on children, I guess, except the United States Senate. So that's first. And second, you have Donald Trump, the hypocrisy again of saying that he wanted a law and order candidate. You have someone here who is accused of one of the most, if not the most serious crimes we have. The fact that Republicans want to put, and we're in a place now where we have to decide what type of America we want to be, but we have gone back into our tribalism, we've gone back into our respective corners, and Republicans literally want to put someone who many people believe has valid accusations of pedophilia against them in the United States Senate.
As awful as it sounds for him to say that, it is even more awful for the people who are involved personally in that, Ed. I hope you understand.
And Roy Moore got thrown out twice for not upholding the law, and he's supposed to be a judge. Yet you want he's a law and order candidate. He was unfit before these.
I got to go. Hey, look, you guys will come back, but Billy Bush is talking.